Now, I'm told by all the clever commentators that the European question has gone away, that it isn't relevant, that it isn't pertinent to our everyday lives. And yet, we're talking about post offices, we're talking about bin collections, we're talking about the tens of thousands of monstrous, ghastly wind turbines that will despoil all of our beautiful countryside. We're talking about these issues, and we hear government ministers, and we hear what pretends to be the opposition party appearing on the news, arguing the pros and cons of whether a post office should stay open or should close. But what none of them talk about, what none of them dare talk about, is the politics that dare not speak its name. The fact that over 75% of the legislation by which we live in this country is now not made for the men and women that we vote for and send to Westminster. It has been transferred across to the institutions of the European Union, and the reason we're not having that debate is the parties are simply too frightened to tell you the truth. And really, I suppose we shouldn't be surprised about this, should we? Because we had a general election at which all three parties said, vote for us, send us to Westminster, and we promise you that we will give you a referendum on the European Constitutional Treaty. And what happened? The Labour Party, frankly, have got into office on a lie, haven't they? It is a lie. The Liberal Democrats, what we heard from Lord Willoughby about all their remarkable twists and turns, I mean, their European policy appears to be completely at sea. But of course the truth is that the Liberal Democrats are fanatically supportive of a United States of Europe, and they don't want the 6 million people that voted for them at the last general election to know what they really stand for. Well, I'll tell you something. In the European campaign of 2009, we will let every Liberal Democrat voter in this country know what their party really stands for and ask them to vote for us. But perhaps worst of all is the Conservative Party's position. You see, they purport to be Eurosceptic, don't they? They purport to want to stand up for the national interest. But what have we seen under David Cameron? We've seen the fishing policy, whereby Michael Howard said he would take back British waters if he became the Prime Minister. We've seen Cameron drop that policy. We saw the one deliverable promise that Cameron made when he was elected leader, the promise to take his party out of the European People's Party in Strasbourg, and to do so within months. We've seen him turn his back on that. But worst of all is the fact that he said that the Conservative Party were opposed to the EU Constitution, but now that it's gone through the House of Commons, now that it's gone through the House of Lords, he simply wants to say nothing about it at all. If David Cameron stood up this afternoon and said that the next Conservative government would give the British people a referendum on that constitutional treaty because it would not have legitimacy, given that the government of the day was elected on that manifesto, David Cameron, if he did that, could kill the Lisbon Treaty this afternoon, but he refuses to do it. You see, if Cameron did it, it would stiffen the arm of the Polish president, wouldn't it? It would help the Czechs. And it would make a second referendum in Ireland all but impossible. But he won't do it. And that is why what we have to do, and what we are going to do in the European elections of 2009, is we are going to be on every single ballot paper in the United Kingdom, and we are the party of opposition. We are the party that says we want to trade with Europe, we want to be friendly with Europe, but we insist that we should make our own laws in this country, because the best people to govern Britain are the British people themselves. And I find it remarkable that despite the fact this constitutional treaty hasn't gone through, despite the fact the EU itself does not have the legitimacy to be framing a foreign policy, we're seeing one, aren't we? Because there was a European summit that took place in Brussels this week. Now, it seemed at that summit that they couldn't really agree very much on what to say about Russia and the situation in South Ossetia. But there is one thing that they all agree on. There's one thing that all the European leaders agree on, and David Cameron agrees with it, and the Lib Dems agree with it. They all agree that the European Union and NATO should continue to expand to the east, and that we should take in the Ukraine and Georgia as members of both organisations. And I think this is one of the most dangerous foreign policy developments that I've seen in my lifetime. All of us that have grown up through the Cold War, always had this feeling that somehow Russia posed a massive threat to us. But what we've never understood is that the Russians fear us far more than we fear Russia. And I'm not defending what's going on in South Ossetia at the moment, but what I'm saying is to expand the EU and to expand NATO, to take in the Ukraine, to take in Georgia, would be a provocative act on what is an unstable country and would be absolute madness, and we must make that part of our campaign next year and make it clear that for the security of the world it is vital that we maintain an independent British foreign policy. We must fight for that. Now, these elections next year do offer us a big opportunity. We are going to be the only opposition party, and what we have got to do is we have got to turn the European elections next year into the referendum that you've never had. Nationally, we've got to get millions and millions of people to vote for us. Last time, in 2004, 2.7 million souls went out and voted for UKIP, and it rocked the political establishment. What we've got to do next year is to create a political earthquake that they simply cannot ignore. We must make those elections next year a referendum on our relationship with the European Union. And I think we've got to change some of the things that we've been saying and some of the things that we've been doing. Because I think too often it's been easy to characterise UKIP as people who just knock and knock and knock and knock. We say this is wrong, we say that's wrong. We've not been offering good, positive alternatives. And what I want us to do is to paint a vision of a 21st century relationship between Britain and our European neighbours. A relationship where we can trade with each other. A relationship where we can go and work in Paris or they can come and work here. But a relationship that says, outside of European Union, we have a fantastic relationship within an organisation that has now nearly a third of the population of the earth. Outside of the European Union, we would be free to do our own trade deals with our Commonwealth partners and our kith and kin across the globe. So it needs to be less about what's wrong with the EU. It needs to be less about how awful Neil Kinnock is. Well, no, perhaps we'll leave that one in. And it needs to be positive messages about what we stand for, and positive messages about what our MEPs would do. And you heard this morning from Marta what her plan is. I think when we tell the country that the EU's former chief accountant, who was sacked by Neil Kinnock, is going to go to Brussels and report back how your money is spent every day, that's a positive reason for going out and voting UKIP next June. To find out more about who we are and what we stand for, go to the UK Independence Party website at www.ukip.org.